And next we have Sky Realms Online Grayhold, a LitRPG adventure written by Troy Osgood. This is 415 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Sky Realms Online is the largest and most popular virtual reality MMORPG ever made. Set amongst the mystical floating islands of Hankarth, it's played and enjoyed by millions per every hour, until something goes wrong. Unable to log out, the players find themselves reduced to level 1, and in the starting zones. They receive a cryptic message from the developers stating that for unknown reasons they are trapped in the game and may have to live out their lives within the virtual world. Hall is one of those trapped in the game. He's been playing Skyrim Online as a spear-wielding skirmisher ever since the beta. And instead of panicking as many do, he decides to make the most of it, to play the game and live his life, all while quietly hoping that the developers will find a fix. It doesn't take how long to find out that while some aspects of the game are the same, the difficulty level is beyond anything he's ever experienced. Together with a new party of trapped players and NPCs with canned answers, Hal will find out just how different Skyrim's Online has become, and how playing a game is different from living the game. So there we go. Full disclosure, I received advance copy for review. I purchased the copy when it became available. Okay, this is another one from a first-time LitRPG author. The author has other stuff out there. The novel has a really pretty cover. I'll say that about it. But I was mostly bored with the story, and that's unfortunate. The story isn't poorly written. And what I mean by that is that it's on a technical level, not broken, and it's not poorly written in that respect. However, there are story issues, and that the novel and the story never really gave me a reason to care about the main character, or a slice of life adventure. This is something that's really specific to like a slice of life story. And I'll get into that in a minute. So after the annoying setup of the story, which I'll also explain, you really just follow the main character as he and his group of friends explore the world, go on quests, and fight monsters. There's no real plot, and you're just following the main character and his group as he does stuff. And again, this is essentially what a slice of life story is, so that's perfectly fine. And I like slice of life stories. I know other people don't, just because they feel like they're not plot. However, if you're going to do a slice of life story, and there's not going to be a plot, obviously, then you need to give me some other reason to like really want to stick around and with the character besides plot. Either, generally, I love the main character and I want to follow him on his adventures because I like him, or the action is so good that I just can't wait to get to that next fight, or the game mechanics are so neat that I want to see how it unfolds and develops. And so those are the highlights and the reasons why I personally like slice of life stories. And even though there may not be like a real plot or like saving the world or whatever the case is, if there are some other aspects of it that are still enjoyable, I'll be more than happy to follow this main character on his journey for multiple novels because it's interesting. There's something else besides plot that I'm still, engaged in. Unfortunately, none of that was here. And so I got bored. There's a minor amount of character development for the main character, but nothing really for the other group members. And so just from that alone, I was like, why should I care about this guy and what he does? And that was never really developed for me, at least. The action in the story, it's okay. It's not bad. Not amazing. The RPG stuff, pretty standard. Levels, quests, that kind of stuff. Nothing amazing about it, but also nothing like nothing bad, nothing amazing. There are lots of quests, but ultimately there's kind of no purpose behind. Like a lot of the story feels like the main character is just kind of floating around. Learning what the difference between the new game mechanics and the old ones, kind of whining about like, oh, suddenly I was max character, but now I'm level 1. Am I going to ever get back to the world? That's a minor point of it. And just like going on quests with meeting other characters, kind of exploring a little bit. And that's what it is. And that's perfectly fine. There is no purpose though. And that kind of shunted things down that, even in a slice of life story, if there's like a goal, you can still kind of get the feeling of like, oh, they're doing these things for a purpose. There's like a reason for them to do this. And that was never really here. Also, not really an antagonist in the story. There's one that's hinted at towards the end of the novel that's like, oh, that might be the series antagonist for book 2 or book 3 or the series. But there's no real antagonist in this book. I will say that the ending quest of this novel is actually quite entertaining and it's good. And it actually added some like real potential with the series. Like, oh, there's a glimpse of town building mechanics, and there's a potential plot line that might develop into book 2 that I thought may be interesting, but I was still kind of bored with the other 90% of the story. There are a few things I found annoying about the story. One, the premise just doesn't make sense to my brain. It's a weird alternative version of Trapped in the Game setup. The players get their minds uploaded during an attack on the game servers. They're taken offline for 2 whole years. And when no one can figure out how to put them back in their bodies, the game company just decides to restart the game and let the trapped players play. Only they add realism, the sensation of pain, and possibly permadeath. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense to my brain, and it honestly isn't needed. Like, that setup doesn't honestly lend itself to the storyline. And I to some degree, I feel like the author put it there because of Sword Art Online. Like, maybe he felt like, oh, this is how these stories start. I watched Sword Art Online, and whether that's the case or not, that's kind of the vibe that I got. It maybe sound like weird commentary or like some poke at genre tropes to some degree. It didn't come off that way to me, though. It just felt odd. And it's not like it's not justified or it's not consistent in the story. Like, it's consistent, but it just didn't make sense to me. So there we go. Another thing about me were the constant comparison the main character made between the old game and the new version. And this is like super heavy in like the first 40% of the novel. It continues throughout the story where it's like, oh man, this mechanic is completely different from the old game. And he would explain all the rules about the old game and then what the new thing goes in this world. And it kept bugging me because we, as the reader, never saw the old game. Like, you see it a little bit in like the first like intro portion of it, but none of the rules for that game were ever explained to us. So in my brain, I'm always like, why is he just making these comparisons to something I've never seen as a reader? What's the point? Or why not just tell me what the rules are in this new story? Because the old rules don't matter because they don't exist. They don't apply here anymore. So the comparison doesn't make sense. Like, the comparison would make sense if like there was a previous story to this where it was the regular MMO and suddenly the rules change in book 2. That's not the case though. It's just, these are just things that the character's going through. And so making that comparison didn't make sense in my brain. It just felt like, it felt kind of like whining to me. And I was like, oh, that's a choice, but it bugs me. So there we go. It just made the story a little harder to enjoy personally. Overall though, not bad writing. Again, I just was never really given a reason to care about this life-size story. So I was ultimately just kind of bored reading it. I did finish it. Again, the end questline story, actually good. But it wasn't enough to like make up for the other portion of the story. I was like, okay, this is stuff that's happened. It's not like badly written. Action is decent, but I don't really care. So there you go. So for me, you could score a 5 out of 10. Skyrim's Online Grayhold, the LitRPG adventure with a score of 5 out of 10.